Hello, I'm Richard Chambers, Senior Internal Audit Advisor for Audit Board, and welcome to another in my continuing series on Agents of Change, where I'm joined by leading internal audit professionals to discuss what does it take to be agents of change in our profession today. This week, I'm joined by Theresa Grafenstein, a long-time acquaintance and a great friend. Terry is currently the Global Chief Auditor for Technology at Citi, where she's been for the last 2.5 years. Before that, Terry was Managing Director at Deloitte. But then before that, that's where our backgrounds are a bit similar. She was the Inspector General for the United States House of Representatives. I think we met maybe once or twice back in the day when we were both in the Inspector General community. But Terry, it's great to see you again, and thank you for agreeing to join us this week.
Thank you for having me on, Richard. It's really nice to see you personally again and also to be included.
You know, Terry, in my book, Agents of Change, I take the position that internal auditors should seek to drive change in the organizations they serve. And I define agents of change in the profession as internal auditors who are catalysts for transformation that creates value within the organizations they serve. What's your view on internal auditors as agents of change? And is that how you would define it?
I absolutely would define it that way, Richard. I thought that was when I read the book, I thought that was a great way to describe us. And I don't think everybody naturally, if you're an internal audit, would you naturally say, oh, I'm going to blaze some trails and change these things and change the world? But I think those, if you want to be committed to the profession and really be a leader in the profession, that's really how you should see yourself. I think that one of the worst things you could do is sort of have that defeatist view. It's like, well, I'm only one person and I'm an auditor and I don't run this place. And how can I make a difference? You can make a difference. You just need to position yourself that way.
I've watched your career over the years, and it's been evident to me that just wherever you went, you were this inspiring change agent in the organizations you served. Let me ask you this: from your experience, how receptive have members of management and even boards been in the organizations where you've served, particularly in the more recent years since you were out of government?
So I think that people just in general, whether it's related to an audit or just life in general, people are a little afraid of change. And so they're going to be naturally skeptical. They're going to want to make sure that they trust you. Why do you want to do this? Is something wrong? Did I do something? Am I going to get in trouble? And so there's all these just natural feelings of that. And so I think that if we take the human aspects of that into account, things go a lot quicker, a lot more smoothly, because people know that you're a trusted person. I'm not out to get anybody. I'm not out to get you. I'm out to help us to get to a better place. And so I think that you can't come in and on day one say, I'm here to rip the place apart and I'm going to completely turn it upside down and change everything. Nobody wants you to do. Nobody wants that to happen. I think you need to lay the groundwork first by becoming a known person where they know you and they know your heart and they know that where you're coming from. And after that, it's a good investment of time. After that, then you can make your changes. And so it definitely, I've been in private sector. I've been, to your point, I was in the government for 25 years in the Inspector General world. And then, often public accounting where you're dealing with clients, and now in the private sector and financial services. And one of the common things, I think there's more things in common than there are difference, because humans are humans, and regardless of their backgrounds. And so I think that those principles hold true across all of those industries.
Even in the federal government, when I was wearing the sort of the heavy mantle of being the Inspector General, and normally you expect that people are going to be resistant and a bit fearful. If you take a different approach, and if you really open up and you try and help the organization improve, people will be more receptive to you. Is that what you found?
I absolutely did find that. And so I worked for the U.S. House of Representatives for 19 years of my career. And That's a place, it's, you're dealing with politicians, and the idea that they have an auditor running around actually comes as quite a surprise to some of them when they first find out. And then, you have to invest time, because every 2 years I'd have an election and I'd have a new batch of staffers and a new batch of members that were on my oversight committee, and I'd have to reinvest in really making those relationships. But once they get to know you and they realize I'm not out there to make headlines, I'm behind the scenes, and I'm here to make the place better. And it's better if I find the cracks than if a bad actor does. And I think some of the fun or great examples is, going into the head counsel for the speaker's office and the minority leader's office, and saying, hey, I know that one of the biggest cyber threats out there is phishing. And so I really think that, we don't have a phishing campaign right now. We really need to get our staff, 10,000 political staffers, trained up on what it means to protect the House from phishing, and making the pitch to them saying, I'd like to orchestrate a phishing attack against the House, but I need your support to do that. Now, it would be benign. I didn't have actual, malware attached to it, but it was that was a heavy lift. And to go in there with that, and they thought that I was crazy initially,
Yeah.
until I sold the case to them. I said, this is something we need to do, because if I don't do this and get people on, kind of on alert what a phishing email looks like, a bad actor is going to be successful, and they're going to get on our network, and it's going to be a lot worse. And so after some, really intense conversations, I got their buy-in, and my organization was the first ever to conduct a series of phishing exercises until it became operationalized. And so at that point, the the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, took it on as an operationalized role. But we were the ones blazing the trails on that one, and it was risky.
So then you didn't have to be the heavy and go in and tell somebody they inadvertently opened a phishing email. It was on somebody else once you transferred that responsibility.
Exactly, but they did used to click my links. And so we would send out very enticing, very enticing, because the bad guys do that. The bad guys will put a lot of it, they'll invest time to figure out what's going to make somebody click a link. And so we would do things knowing the congressional, the election cycle, and when they would go on recess. And for one particular year, we did one where we talked about the first annual Thanksgiving. It was like pardon a turkey. The White House has been doing that since, I think, the 1950s, where they would pardon a turkey and all that. And we said, well, we're going to do that at the House. And I'll tell you what, I got a lot of clicks, on that one. And they call my office and say, are we going to have that turkey gala? It's like, no, it was a phishing exercise.
Oh, gee. Let me ask you this. I believe that before internal auditors can be seen as change agents in their organizations, that they have to start by being change agents in the internal audit function itself, in the audit department. Do you agree with that? And if so, what are some things that you would point to in terms of transformational changes you've made in audit over the years?
I don't think you can go out and clean other people's houses until you clean your own. And so, meaning, unless you have your stuff in order, I don't know what moral credibility you would have in going out and making recommendations to how other people should be, making their ship straighter. So one of the first things I've ever done, anytime I come into a position of leadership, I take an assessment of, okay, where are we at? And then if I can, I benchmark to other organizations, or I, talk to people in my network and see what's going on in the space. Some of the things I know that I've done that were hugely transformational internally is I stood up an advisory function at the Inspector General, unheard of in that community, unheard of. And so when I did that, that was back in like 2006, 2007, dating myself, really, really cutting edge. Nobody had done that. But I really felt strongly. Obviously I put up the internal firewalls to make sure you're not auditing and advising and making sure that you had that sort of firewall there. But I really wanted to make sure that, knowing that environment, if we could get in there and really blaze the trails and help them, be true advisors to setting, helping them to, Congress to noodle through things like, what does risk management look like here? Because it's a different organization. What does something like capital planning look like for things that are institutional, not political? And really looking at it through a different lens. That was huge. And the thing is that before I could sell it to the stakeholders, I had to sell it to the auditors, because a lot of the auditors thought this is like blasphemy. You can't do advisory. That's not what auditors do. And so you have to get people on board internally at first. And some of that is, I think sometimes people are so quick to rush in their changes that they end up making themselves their own stumbling blocks. It takes longer to get people on board, but the thing is that it'll be more successful if you slow down and you talk to people. It's like, well, what are your concerns, auditors? Why do you think this is a bad idea? Can we put safeguards in? How can I work with you to make you feel comfortable about this? And eventually, if you invest that time on the front end and helping people understand why you're going in a particular direction, they end up being your biggest advocates. The ones who may have been the biggest sort of skeptics end up becoming your partners. And so I've done that quite a few times, and it's been, I think, the fun part about the job.
One of the terms that I use for technology and internal audit is that it's a capacity multiplier. That by using technology, you will enhance the capacity of the department, of the team. You'll be able to get audits done quicker and better, and that you'll be able to address more risks over time. Are there ways that you've used technology in your various roles that you think really enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of the audit team?
Oh, absolutely. So if you're not using technology, you're missing out. You're not giving your organization the assurance that it needs and deserves. I can remember early in my career, I worked for the U.S. Department of Defense, and we would walk around with physical folders for sample items, and there may be 300 sample items, and I'd have to carry that big old briefcase around to different sites and stuff. And oh my gosh, fast forward to where we're at now. Instead of doing samples, I can look at an entire universe. Why just stop at a sample? Look at the whole universe of transactions, when you're able to do that. I think that it is a multiplier. So instead of doing things where you're physically going through and looking at specific fields and specific records, write a script for that. Have robotics process automation, artificial intelligence. There's all sorts of things that are ready right now that we never had in the past. And then that way it frees you up to have auditors do things that really require critical thinking and analysis. When I think about my current employer, I work at Citi, financial services. They are hugely invested in innovations. We have an entire department for our internal audit that just focuses on innovations. And so they're constantly pressing us, help us to help you. And I work with the innovations team all the time as to how do we automate this? How can we go through and look through millions and millions of records to identify critical fields? How do we know if metrics in or out of risk appetite or is kind of going haywire, and it's an area we need to drill into, whether it's in cybersecurity, it could be in continuity of operations, business, it could be in regulatory areas. The whole possibilities are just endless, but it absolutely frees up your staff to do things that are sort of more on the anomaly side and really drilling in and asking those tough questions instead of using all their time to kind of go through things that can just be done with a press of the button.
What ways has use in or reliance on technology helped you and your team during the past year in terms of the audit team's reliance on technology? Are there ways that it got you through COVID that maybe made you more efficient and maybe changed the way you're going to do things in the future?
So beyond just looking at things like transactions, when you think about technology with COVID initially, and for all of us, it's like, how are we going to do our jobs? And technology, just like we're speaking right now on a tech platform, technology has been an enabler for people to stay connected. So I have a team, I have about 300 technology auditors that report on my team. And they're all over the world, literally all over the world. And so there's no way that we can be in the same room. And that the fact that we can connect with each other and really have that connection and look at each other and see each other eye to eye, despite being in different time zones in different corners of the world, that in itself is such an enabler. And I don't know that I think COVID really pushed that along, because we had been using videos in the past, but now it's If you're not using a video, it's odd, that the person doesn't have their video on. But aside from that, things like looking at critical third-party suppliers, supply chain risk is a huge risk factor, for all industries. And so when COVID happened, it became illegal in certain countries to be able to go around the country or do site visits and just get people on planes and all that just wasn't a possibility. So technology, again, you had to get smart about it. Well, how do I do physical controls at a third-party supplier who may be doing things that require you to see stuff, so that way you can see whether or not they have adequate physical security measures? Well, technology is a great way to be able to do that, to walk with them, on video to see what it is that they're doing, to kind of look over their shoulder, but on video. And then other things like sharing screens and going through transactions that way and processes. But it really has been a real lifesaver through COVID. And it's also helped us to feel more connected on a very sort of personal level.
In the book that we wrote on Agents of Change, we listened to more than 600 chief audit executives who told us what they thought the real characteristics or attributes that agents of change and internal audit needed to share in common. And we boiled it down to 4 overarching sort of characteristics or traits: business acumen, strategic mindset, being relationship centric, and being innovative. Are there any others that you might add to that list?
One I think would add, which is kind of baked into all those, is courage. A lot of times being the change agent, it's scary. I mean, when you think about, but the thing is with courage, a lot of times people think courage, they think of jobs that require physical danger, like being a soldier or a police officer, and those obviously require a lot of courage. But being an auditor, it's very rare that we're the popular kids in the room, and not everybody's happy that we're there, and they're not always happy to hear our messages. And so sometimes you're out there standing on your own in meetings where people don't want you to say anything, and you have to speak up. And so I think that with all of it is having the courage to say what needs to be said, but doing it in a way that has that empathy, and doing it in a way that has those human relationships, and doing it in a way that shows you understood the problem, and you're not coming in and doing a drive-by audit where it's just you have a sort of a really light level understanding, really understanding the problem, but saying what needs to be said in a thoughtful and kind way.
If I ask you to pull out a crystal ball and share your perspectives, what do you think the biggest challenge for our profession will be in the decade ahead?
I think people a lot of times they don't feel like they should have to be technologists, that let the IT people do that. But I think technology might be a challenge for a segment of our audit population, because they don't feel like that really has to be their job. But it's going to be all of our job, because technology is going to be just baked into every aspect of what we do. So I would just say, just really kind of embrace it. It doesn't mean you have to be a coder. It doesn't mean you have to, go through and start pulling apart algorithms. But you do need to kind of understand that, because we're immersed in it. It's just going to become more and more so.
I know that you are one who has always been thinking in transformational terms. I know you've been a real evangelist for the importance of cybersecurity and strong, effective controls to protect the organizations, even before it was kind of the top risk in the internal audit portfolio. And so I thank you again on behalf of the profession for doing all of that. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Richard. I will also thank you for everything you've done for our profession as well. You're just sort of a light out there, and I'm really glad to call you my friend. And thank you very much for having me on today.